You've been asking for it for a while, so next up on our fixing block is the 5e Bladesinger, the weird melee wizard combination subclass. So if you want to see why I think it needs to be fixed, or why I don't think it needs to be fixed, stay tuned. What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and a big shout out to my patrons on Patreon who voted that this be the next video topic that I cover. So if you have been waiting for this, you can thank them for that. So if you don't know about the Bladesinger in 5th edition, I kind of understand that because it's in the Sword Coast Adventures Guide, a book that I consistently say was sort of forgotten about by Wizards of the Coast. It was the first supplemental player-based guide that came out after the main 3, the Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, Dungeon Master's Guide. And pretty much anything that was really good from that was reprinted in Xanathars, and then everything else was kind of forgotten. Perhaps you know about it because you've heard about it on the internet, you've seen other people play it, maybe you use D&D Beyond or some other character creation app and you see it as an option to choose. That could be why. So there is a lot to unpack with the Bladesinger, and it's tricky, and I'm not entirely sure that I'll be able to give you a solid set of fixes. I'm going to do my best, but I have a lot of opinions on this. So let's go ahead and jump over to D&D Beyond. So we can see it right here, right? So first of all, Sword Coast Adventures Guide really introduced one of the first times and only times of racially restricted classes. Now, it does go on and say right here, your DM can lift this restriction to better suit the campaign. It reflects the story of Bladesingers in the Forgotten Realms, but might apply to your DM's setting or your DM's version of the realms. So, the Bladesinger class is restricted to elves or half-elves only. So, important part there, if you're playing in a Forgotten Realms campaign without some lore and working with your DM, in theory, you can only be an elf. And again, that was the Battle Rager Barbarian was the other one that was dwarf restricted, and they kind of have just never done that concept again. So there is a lot, and this is what I think comes up a lot as issues people have with the Bladesinger. There is a lot of lore and history behind Bladesingers in the history of the Forgotten Realms, right? You can see it, there's a little bit here barely mentioned, but there is a ton of history of the way they work and their different fighting styles and the choices they make, and that's what ticks a lot of people off, and I'll get to that as we go through. So what do you get at level 2? When you adopt this tradition at 2nd level, you gain proficiency with light armor and proficiency with one type of one-handed melee weapon of your choice. You also gain proficiency in the performance skill if you don't already have it. So, first of all, I should say that the kind of lore behind the blade singing style of the name is essentially the sound that their weapon makes as they're weaving in and out and attacking can kind of almost sound like a song, and sometimes they'll hum and sort of sing along and almost like sing a song under their breath while they're doing it, but they're not actually like performing per performance checks in my mind. So that kind of felt a little funky to me, but whatever. So that is something weird. And then it says proficiency with light armor. Normally as a wizard, you don't get proficiency with any armor. And then a one-handed melee weapon of your choice. So in the lore of Bladesingers, typically they would wear elven chainmail, right? Which is a magic item in 5th edition that gives you proficiency in the armor itself, even if you don't have proficiency in it, and they would wield longswords. So you could choose a longsword here, but as a wizard, and when we talk about blade singing in a little bit here, you're probably going to be dexterity based. So, and the Bladesong, the key feature of being a Bladesinger, requires you to only wear light armor or no armor. So it immediately invalidates the concept of elven chain and really hampers the idea of using a longsword. I know that's a big sticking point with a lot of people online, that you can't play the traditional lore perfect Bladesinger because of the way the rules are set. So that's something to consider and a big issue a lot of people have. So the big benefit you get as a Bladesinger is at 2nd level, you get this ability called Bladesong, right? You can use a bonus action at the to start the Bladesong, which lasts for 1 minute, so 10 rounds in combat. It ends early if you're incapacitated, if you don medium heavy armor or a shield, or if you use 2 hands to make an attack with a weapon. You can also dismiss the Bladesong at any time you choose, no action required. While it is active, you gain the following benefits. You gain a bonus to your AC equal to your intelligence modifier. Your walking speed increases by 10 feet. You have advantage on acrobatics checks. And you have a bonus to Constitution saving throws made to maintain concentrations on spells. This bonus is equal to your intelligence modifier. You can use this twice, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a short or long rest. So, by all means, this is probably the main reason you're going to take this, because it's amazing, right? It is an amazing ability. No one is going to tell you that this is a bad ability. To clarify a couple things, where it says if you use 2 hands to make an attack with a weapon, that means a 2-handed weapon. I believe there is sage advice and official rulings that you can dual wield if you want. Reminder, you are going to probably be an elf or a half-elf, so you're usually going to get proficiency with long sword, short sword, longbow, short bow, if you're following the, or unless you're a drow or something like that. You may have an inborn proficiency with weapons, which kind of makes the one type of one-handed melee weapon potentially pointless for you if you're going to go longsword. So the thing is, the crux of part of the problem with the Bladesinger is this ability sort of sounds and makes it sound like it wants to force you into melee, right? In theory, you are a weapon-wielding wizard who wants to fight with a sword. And that's kind of how Bladesinger has always been, but it doesn't, there's sort of 2 schools of thought, and you can look this up. You just type in 5e Bladesinger and you'll see thousands of different posts on different people coming up with how do you play a Bladesinger, when does Bladesinger get good, is Bladesinger good, multi-class Bladesinger, fixed Bladesinger, there's a ton of stuff out there. So you use your bonus action to enter Bladesong, which is great because you can still use your action to cast spells. And it's going to boost your AC by your intelligence modifier. So you could be wearing studded leather armor, which is 12 plus your dexterity modifier. You could be using mage armor, which is 13 plus your dexterity modifier. Have that, and then add your intelligence modifier on top of that. So your AC could be really good for 1 minute. Your movement speed's going to go up by 10, so that's usually 30 to 40. Advantage on acrobatics checks, that's, I guess, better for escaping grapples. And then the bonus to Constitution saving throws for concentration is huge. That's a big buff for you. One thing I would do just right off the bat is where you gain proficiency in performance at the top there. I would probably make that proficiency in acrobatics or performance your choice, because you're going to get advantage on acrobatics checks from Bladesong, but acrobatics actually has a use in combat where performance doesn't. And again, this class is clearly keyed towards combat. So part of the problem is it seems like it wants to force you into melee, but you are still a wizard with a d6 hit die. So even if you do wade into melee, it's gonna be difficult, right? It's gonna be hard. You're still gonna get hit and you're gonna go down quick, potentially, right? Your armor class is gonna be significantly higher than anybody else's because of the way you can stack things on Bladesong, haste, shield. You have a lot of options to really boost your AC up there, and it's not uncommon for mid-level Bladesingers to be rocking an AC of somewhere in the range of 30. Obviously, a critical hit will still hit you regardless, and you have really no way to get around that because you can't wear medium or heavy armor, and that would be where you could get adamantine armor, that kind of a thing. But there are really 2 schools on how you play a Bladesinger. Do you try and play a Bladesinger as it seems to be intended, as a melee wielding wizard, where you wade your character into melee and you try to fight them with a sword or a weapon, and then maybe mix in some casting? Or do you just play your Bladesinger as a pure wizard and just use Bladesong as kind of like an oh shit button to self-defend yourself, which works out just fine? You could honestly take Bladesinger as your tradition and then never look at pretty much any of the other abilities and only use Bladesong, when you get into a combat, you activate Bladesong as a bonus action, and then you continue to be like a wizard, maybe hang out on the back line and cast your spells as you would normally, and honestly, that works out fine. Your armor class is boosted, your movement speed is boosted, your concentration checks are boosted. You have a good chance to just play as a wizard and never deal with any of the kind of elven lore fighting with a sword and spell kind of a thing. And that works out fine. You really won't be upset if you do that. You can try and be the melee wielding Bladesinger as well, where you're kind of maybe taking combat boosting spells, like you are going to have shield, you are going to have absorb elements, you're going to take things like Misty Step and Mage Armor, Mirror Image, Blur, Blink, Expeditious Retreat, all these different things that will boost your means in combat. And that does work as well. So you can do a bunch of different things there, but there's really no correct answer on how to play it. A lot of folks will also possibly tell you to multiclass into fighter, because if you multiclass into fighter, you can get a fighting style, which you could take dueling, right, to get a +2 bonus to your melee attacks if you're going to try to go the melee route. You're going to get second wind for a little bit of healing. If you start with fighter, you're going to get more hit points. You're going to get constitution saving throws right out the gate. So there's a lot of things you can do with this. Also, there's the potential to get to be a fighter and continue down the path of Eldritch Knight with only 2 levels in Wizard. So you're an Eldritch Knight fighter, but you have Bladesong, which you can use as a bonus action, so you could just be a that much more defensible fighter as well. So there's a couple of different options you have there. But if we can, let's continue on, and then I'll come back and we'll talk. And I have played one, so I can speak to this. So at 6th level, you get extra attack. You get it a little bit later than everybody else, but that's when Wizard's next features come on as a 6th level. So take the attack action, you can attack twice. At 10th level, you get Song of Defense. When you take damage, you can use your reaction to expend a spell slot and reduce the damage to you by an amount equal to 5 times the spell's slot level. And at 14th level, you add your intelligence modifier to the damage of your melee attacks while your Bladesong is active. So a couple of other issues people bring up consistently is Bladesinger was introduced in the Sword Coast Adventures Guide, the book that brought 2 of the best cantrips out there that no one, you may or may not know about because they're only technically contained in the Sword Coast Adventures Guide, and that was Green Flame Blade and Booming Blade. I guess I probably should have done this ahead of time, but let's go ahead and I'll just jump up to the top here, and we'll type in Green Flame Blade, and we'll go look at that. I don't know why that's not coming up. All right, well, whatever. We'll just go over to spells, and we'll just look at the cantrips, and I'll show you both of those spells real quick. So here's Booming Blade, right? It is a 1-action cantrip as part of an attack action used to cast a spell. So you are making an attack with your weapon, using your stats that you would use to attack with the weapon, and then the Booming Blade is applied on top of that. Make a melee attack against a creature within the spell's range, which is 5 feet. On a hit, the target suffers the normal effects of the attack, and they're sheathed in booming energy. If they willingly move before the start of your next turn, they take a d8 thunder damage, and the spell ends. And then as you level up, it does damage initially and continues to increase. So the initial hit does a d8 thunder damage, and if they move, it takes 2d8, and then 2d8 on the initial strike, and then 3d8 on the secondary strike, and then the first one, and then if you're making it to 17th level, it's 3d8 on the initial hit, and 4d8 if they move. Green Flame Blade is very similar. It starts with when you attack on a hit, the target suffers the normal damage, and the blade is wrapped in green flame, and it jumps to the second target within 5 feet that takes damage equal to your spellcasting ability modifier. At 5th level, you add a d8 to that. The initial target takes a d8 fire damage. The secondary target takes a d8 plus your spellcasting mod, and then that goes up again to 2d8, and 2d8 plus your spellcasting mod, and then all the way up to 3d8 at 11th level, and then 3d8 plus your spellcasting modifier to the secondary target. So, very cool, very powerful cantrips for dealing melee damage. Part of the problem is that's super useful as a Bladesinger if you're trying to do the melee thing until you hit 6th level, because now you can choose to take the attack action with your weapon and make 2 attacks, or cast the cantrip. It kind of, one will invalidate the other, because you could take 2 attacks, which may, you may do well, and if you have a magic weapon, that may be very good. Or you could use an action to cast Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade to potentially deal damage if they move, to potentially deal damage to 2 targets. So you have, some options there. Your 10th level ability, I've never liked this because I don't think there's too many times, unless, again, maybe you're hit with a critical hit, where you are going to be sacrificing spells to reduce the damage by an amount equal to 5 times the spell slot level. So, I mean, if you think about that, if you could blow a 5th level spell slot to reduce the damage by 25. How much more survivability or damage could you do if you cast that 5th level spell slot rather than using it as a reaction to reduce your damage? And then again, the 14th level ability is useful when you're in Bladesong. You're going to deal whatever your attacks deal, the damage die of the weapon plus the attacking modifiers to the damage plus intelligence on top of that. If you have, let's say, a 20 dexterity and a 20 intelligence, that'd be whatever the weapon is plus 10 on the damage die, which is a pretty sizable hit by any means, right? And you could do that twice with 2 attacks. So very good. But my problem, I guess, with the Bladesinger, and it seems like a lot of people's problem with the Bladesinger, is it doesn't seem to know what it wants to do. It wants to be a melee class, but it also is still a wizard. So how do you fix this? So one thing that I've seen a lot of people do, or not do rather, is they never touch Bladesong. They pretty much leave Bladesong alone as it stands. It is pretty much untouched. I have seen a couple people make some adjustments. So one thing I would do here with the training in War and Song, like I said, is give you acrobatics and performance. Something that I've seen people suggest is, rather than having extra attack, take the War Magic feature from the Eldritch Knight Fighter, which is when you take an action to cast a cantrip, you can use a bonus action to make a melee attack. And that could be something to fix, because you could use the bonus action melee. You could use the cantrip to do, let's say, Green Flame Blade, which is an attack, and then you could do a bonus action attack. But part of the reason why they put that on the Eldritch Knight, in my opinion, is that's a big decision for a fighter to make. Do I sacrifice multiple attacks as my attack action, or do I cast 1 cantrip and then a bonus action attack? That's a choice you need to make. So it's a little bit more powerful on a wizard. I don't know that that's the wrong answer. But I guess what I can do is give you a little bit of background, right? I've been playing a Bladesinger I've played about 8 sessions in a game right now, and I had played one a long time ago, but that game was kind of funky, so I won't really talk about that. We are currently level 7, right? So I'm a multi-class fighter Bladesinger, and the reason I did that, again, was for the extra hit points at level 1, the Constitution saving throw proficiency, and a little bit of healing, and the fighting style, really. So I have a one-handed weapon, so I took dueling, so I could add +2 to the damage when I wield a one-handed weapon. And then I have 6 levels of wizard, so I have now extra attack as a Bladesinger. So I can tell you that I'm having an absolute blast with this, and it just so happens that I did this because I kind of knew the party makeup. So my party is currently a rogue, a mastermind rogue, an illusionist wizard, and a celestial warlock. So we have no tank, and we don't really have anybody who's in melee. So I thought this would be an interesting experiment to, rather than playing what I would normally play, like a paladin, someone who's designed to fill the gap the party needs, strength-based, healing, tankiness, heavy armor, all that kind of a thing. I said, let's try something different, and let's be the tank and the melee person as the Bladesinger. And when I decided I was going to be the tank, my concept of that was, I will tank by not having hit points to reduce, to just be able to soak up hits. I'll tank by having a very high AC, so the enemies waste their turn attacking me and can't hit me, and then that protects the party. And that works out very well. Obviously, a critical hit can severely destroy me, because I'm still a wizard with only 1 level of fighter, so my hit points are not great. I only have a 14 constitution. But in every combat, I think I've been hit maybe one time in 8 2 to 3 hour sessions. And other than that, I've pretty much been untouchable because of the way things work. So I have an 18. You know what? I could just show you my character. How about that? So let's just jump back up to the top here. I'll just go over here and I'll just show you my character, and then you can get an idea. So here's my character right here. So once this loads here, you can see my statistics, right? I have studded leather armor. I have an 18 dexterity, so I have a 16 armor class. When I activate Bladesong, that goes up by my intelligence modifier to a 19. So part of my downside with the Bladesinger is I spend basically a turn almost every combat setting up, if you will. So I start the combat with a bonus action to activate Bladesong, and then an action to cast Haste. Now, Haste it's basically a no-brainer for a Bladesinger playing in my scenario, where I get a +2 to my AC, so my armor class is now a 21. My movement speed is doubled, which was 40. It's now 80. I have advantage on dexterity saving throws. I also have advantage on acrobatics checks. I'm doing a lot of things to keep me mobile and active and harder to hit. And then I also have Shield, which is another thing as a Bladesinger. Your first level spell slots are pretty much reserved almost entirely for Shield or Absorb Elements. And when I cast Shield with Haste up and Bladesong on, my AC can go up to a 26. And this was a point by game. There was no stat rolling, so you can see my stats are the way they are. If I was rolling stats and I rolled even higher, then I could be even harder to hit. So this is kind of where I'm at as having played one. And I am having a lot of fun, but part of the reason why is the DM let us get a rare magic item of our choice, and I chose a Sunblade. So a Sunblade, if you don't know, is, you can see here, Green Flame Blade would still act on top of it. It is a +2 weapon. It is considered a magic longsword, but it also is considered to have finesse. And if you are proficient with short swords or long swords, you're proficient with the Sunblade. And so that's part of the thing. I am playing with a longsword, but my longsword is finesse because that's what the magic item does. And then it does extra, obviously it has the ability where it radiates sunlight, which has been useful in the Underdark a couple times. And it does extra damage, an extra D8 to any undead you hit with it, which has also been useful because we've been fighting undead. And it changes all damage to radiant damage rather than slashing. So with dueling, you can see here my Sunblade. I have a +9 to hit with it at level 7, and it does a D8 +8 damage. So that's pretty good. I can now do 2 attacks, and if I have haste up, that's 2 attacks for my action, plus an extra hasted action attack. So I could do pretty well. But part of that is because I have that specific magic item, and I do that specific set of things. So I thought it would also be not a bad idea to go ahead and take a look at old Bladesingers. I'm looking at the 3.5 version of the Bladesinger to see what it got. And there's 2 different versions. There's a version in Complete Warrior and a version in Races of Faerun. But I think the Complete Warrior version was newer. So I said, well, let's take a look. Everybody was talking about how great Bladesingers were. What was the difference? Well, one, it was a prestige class, so I won't go too much into what prestige classes were, but basically you gain a certain requirements, and then you could get this new kind of class. It was never usually a full class. It was a shorter duration class that you would access from your main class. So part of the thing with Bladesinger in 3.5 was your hit die was a D8, up from your wizard back in 3.5 was a D4 hit die. So it bumps up to a D8, so you're significantly more survivable. You also had to have certain requirements to get there, and you can see what they are here. Basically, combat-related things. Here's a really cool art of a Bladesinger. What did you get? You got proficiency with light armor. Well, that answers our other question. You added additional spell slots, so like you can continue your spell progression. Obviously, we can throw that out. We're a wizard, so we get our spells as to normal. You got Bladesong style. When you're wielding a longsword or a rapier in one hand, you gain a bonus to your AC equal to a bonus to armor class equal to your class level up to a maximum of your intelligence bonus, right? So you could potentially get up to a +10, right, up to their class level, yeah. So you can get you up to your intelligence modifier, what it was called bonus in 3.5, up to your intelligence modifier in to your AC. And then it ends if you wield if you wear medium or heavy armor, you lose all benefits. But if you notice, that's all the time. That's not like it's as long as you're wielding a rapier or a longsword in one hand, you have that bonus all the time. Lesser spell song at level 2. Let's see. If you have a rapier or longsword in one hand, a Bladesinger second level or higher can take 10 when making a concentration check to cast defensively. So it's, again, keeping concentration on a spell. You have your intelligence bonus to your intelligence modifier to concentration checks. That kind of fixes that. Song of Celerity. You could quicken a spell of second level as if you had used the quicken spell feat, but without any adjustments to the spell's effective level or casting time. So basically, meta magic was tied. It was a feat you could take, not a class thing tied to sorcerer. So, and then at 8th level, you could quicken spell. So basically what they're saying is you could still fight and you could quicken a spell, so you could do the sword as your like main action and then still cast a spell. So they were kind of incorporating that by giving you the quicken spell feature. At level, let's see, Greater Spell Song at 6th level, you ignore Arcane Spell Failure chances while wearing light armor. We don't have Arcane Spell Failure, so that's not really an issue. And then at 10th level, you got Song of Fury. When you make a full attack with a longsword or rapier, you can make one extra attack a round. And that was basically it. So we kind of get a lot of the abilities from the Bladesinger here in what we have in the 5e version. We get our intelligence modifier to our armor class. We get a bonus to concentration checks. We get extra attacks. The only thing we don't really get is this idea of a quickening spell, and I don't think that that's the answer for the Bladesinger 5th edition. The Vases of Faerun one is pretty much the same thing. They got bonus feats a bunch, and I looked at the feats that you needed to get to enter in to Bladesinger, and it is combat casting, which is essentially as close as you're going to get to like Warcaster in 5th edition. Combat expertise, which was an ability to lower your attack bonus to boost your armor class, which I guess you could argue is shield-like. That was combat expertise. Dodge, you can do the dodge action, so that kind of negates it. And then weapon focus just increased your attacking ability with a longsword or a rapier. So out of all of that, looking at the old version, I don't really see too much more that couldn't be replicated other than the concept of adding in quickening of spells. And I don't think that fits. So how do we fix Bladesinger? I realize now I'm 27 minutes into this video and I haven't really given you much of a fix, but I thought it was important to discuss everything because it's a very polarizing class, and people will tell you should be a melee Bladesinger, you shouldn't be. So here's how I would fix it. I think I would do kind of the thing that I think it's the Hill Dwarf or the Dragon Sorcerer gets at level 2 under Training in War and Song. I'd say your maximum hit points increases by 2, increases by 1 for each level in this class. So that gives you slightly more hit points. It's not going to be a ton. It's going to be 20 extra hit points at level 20, right? So it's not like it's a ton more health, but it is going to make you closer. It's basically going to make you like have a D7 hit die rather than a D8 or a D6. So you're kind of going to be in between, but it'll make you more survivable. So that way you have a better chance of surviving in combat, which is good. Another thing I potentially thought about is tweaking some of these things and possibly not making Bladesong be a thing you need to activate. Maybe Bladesong basically gives you unarmored defense based on intelligence, similar to a monk or a barbarian, where your armor class now equals 10 plus your dexterity plus your intelligence modifier. So that way you don't have to activate Bladesong. It's sort of something you have as an unarmored defense option. Not really sure about that, but I have another thought on that coming a little bit later. I don't really like, as I stated before, I think the 6th level ability, it's extra attack. I think that's, I guess it's fine, right? If you're going to try to be a melee version, if you have the extra hit points from up above and you maybe choose acrobatics instead of performance, you have a couple extra options to keep yourself more survivable. I I saw, you could make the the idea you could gain proficiency. You can use whatever the weapon you pick, right? Proficiency with a one-handed melee weapon of your choice. You can use strength or dexterity with this melee weapon. So if you really want to stick to the idea of using the longsword for the history and the lore, you could do it, but now it uses dexterity. I don't think that that's too broken. It's a one-handed melee weapon of your choice that uses dexterity. It's probably going to be a D8 unless I guess you could use a lance one-handed, so you could do a D12, I guess, in theory, but I think it's a disadvantage if you're not on horseback. So with the idea of giving you the extra hit points, maybe having the extra attack isn't so bad, because that's going to give you the option of using that, using those extra hit points to get in there and actually mix things up in combat. So for 10th level, you can, I don't like this. I don't know what the answer is. Like, part of me is just give you uncanny dodge, like from the rogue, instead of Song of Defense, and then that sort of fixes it. Uncanny dodge is way better than sacrificing a spell slot, multiplying it times 5 to reduce the damage by that amount. Also, I mean, I don't want to step on the rogue's toes, but you're getting the equivalent of what we're calling uncanny dodge 10 levels later, or sorry, 5 levels later than a rogue gets it. So you could say, maybe you just make it that, right? Well, it says direct your magic to absorb damage, but you can reduce your damage taken while Bladesong is active. When you take damage, you can use, again, assuming Bladesong is active, you can use your reaction to reduce the damage taken by half. And then it's essentially a Bladesinger, while Bladesong is active, version of Uncanny Dodge. Another thing you could possibly do, I also have often thought about how I wish I could dash or disengage as a bonus action as a Bladesinger. Again, I don't know. I feel like we're very much going into a rogue territory, but I feel like you're kind of roguey-ish because you're kind of dexterity-based and you're, nimble because you're typically an elf. So I guess for Song of Defense, my fix would basically be you have Uncanny Dodge while your Bladesong is active. It's not flashy. It's not super great, and I don't have a great answer for you. The idea of the quickening of spells is cool, but I don't think that really fits on top of the whole wizard chassis already. And then lastly, Song of Victory, adding your intelligence modifier to the damage of your melee weapon attacks while your Bladesong is active. I think that that's fine. Another thing that I'd probably add to this is you're always under the effect of Bladesong, right? I mean, you could possibly remove the intelligence modifier to damage, and then that kind of gives you the idea I talked about earlier about maybe how you're having an unarmored defense rather than Bladesong. I think the 14th level ability, you've made it this far. You basically, now you don't have to activate Bladesong anymore. It's always on. So that means you always have the intelligence modifier to your... and I'm trying to think about this in balance with other kind of melee classes, but the problem is you're still a wizard, so you still have all the wizard spellcasting and stuff, but now you also have good melee bonuses. But you'd have basically the unarmored defense thing going on. Your movement speed would be increased by 10, which doesn't, that's on par with some other, you're not as good as a monk, but you're about as good as a barbarian. Advantage on acrobatics check is situational. If you're being grappled a lot, then that's super powerful. And the bonus to concentration checks is very powerful. I won't argue that. But again, it does still mean that you can't wield, can't fight with a two-handed weapon. You can't use a shield or heavy armor. So it doesn't fix the concept of the issues with elven chainmail, but I think it'd be okay. So in summation, training in War and Song will say when you gain proficiency with one type of one-handed melee weapon of your choice, you can use strength or dexterity when wielding this one-handed for attack and damage rolls. You gain proficiency in acrobatics or performance if you don't already have it. Your maximum hit points increases by 2 and by an additional 1 for each level you have in this class. Bladesong remains unchanged. Extra attack remains unchanged. Song of Defense, while your Bladesong is activated, you can use a reaction to reduce the damage. When you take damage, you can use your reaction to reduce that damage by half. And then Song, or maybe if you want to make it tied to a spell slot, you can spend a spell slot to reduce the damage by half, but I don't think it should be based on the level of the spell slot. But honestly, if you're just going to make it reduce it by half, maybe remove the spell slot entirely. I don't know. And then lastly, Song of Victory, you add your intelligence modifier to damage of your melee weapon attacks, while your Bladesong to your melee weapon attacks, you are always, or maybe you switch it around. Starting at 14th level, you are always under the effects of Bladesong. Additionally, you add your intelligence modifier to the damage of melee weapon attacks while Bladesong is active, because actually you have to be conscious for Bladesong to be active. It doesn't work while you're sleeping. Again, that does, in theory, give you essentially uncanny dodge all the time, but you're getting this at 14th level, so I think it's okay. Sorry, folks, that was a 35-minute video. I'm sorry. That was a long-winded conversation to get to the fixes at the end, but I thought it important. And if you've come to this channel and you know Nerd Immersion by this point, you know this is my process, right? I want to talk to things in depth. I want to give you all the background. I want to dive into the minutia and give you the reasoning why I'm coming to the determination where I'm at. Having played a Bladesinger now again for 8 sessions and up, as 7th level, I'm fine with it as it is. Would I love to incorporate these changes? Absolutely, because that would be really useful to me as the melee tank in my party. But I'm doing okay as it is, so you could possibly just play Bladesinger fine. Yes, it works good as a multi-class with Eldritch Knight. It also could work really well with a multi-class Arcane Trickster as well. There's a lot of good combinations there. I guess in theory, right, you could use Matt Mercer's new Blood Hunter as well and do a multi-class Bladesinger Blood Hunter, because they're both intelligence-based now. I don't know. It's a good class. It kind of came out at a funky time. I think if Bladesinger came out now, things would be significantly different than they were back then, just because of the way 5th edition has evolved to this point. When we see things like how we have the Hexblade, I think Bladesinger would be different now because we have things like the Hexblade where you get to use your intelligence for your modifier for your attack and damage rolls. Maybe that's something you do for this, right? Rather than adding the intelligence modifier on top of it, you could just use intelligence for your attack and damage rolls, and then you could just focus entirely on intelligence and don't have to worry too much about dexterity. I don't know. So thank you all so much for watching. I do really appreciate this. We're very, very close to 30,000 subscribers at this point. Someone suggested that I do a Q&A video for when I hit 30,000 subscribers, and I think I will do that. I already do monthly Q&As with my patrons, but this would be something where you guys kind of leave comments in the description, and I will compile those questions and answer them as best I can in like an hour-long Q&A video after I hit 30,000 subscribers. So if you want to do that, feel free to ask me any questions, and I'll start compiling a list. Speaking of my patrons, thank you again to all of my patrons over on Patreon. I'm adding some new features to that as well. Maybe I'll make a separate video about it. I don't know. But basically, they're going to now, from the $7 and up tier, they're going to gain access to the videos early. So as soon as they hit YouTube, they're going to gain access to those videos, where everybody else will have to wait till they get eventually published, probably the next day. I think I'm probably going to go back to that process, then releasing these videos at like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Because just kind of getting burnt out at putting stuff out at that pace. Plus, I like to polish things up, and sometimes I miss things when I'm sleepy like this. So be on the lookout. Oh, and a thing I want to add to my Patreon is, at the lowest level tier, suggest things for me to do in my little intro skit at the beginning, where where the screen goes kind of blurry and I do stuff. I've had a couple of really good ones over time, and I've started to thinking of a couple for future videos, but I think that will be a fun thing for patrons to suggest, is things for me to do, whatever we want to call like that intro break thing. I don't know. We'll come up with a name for it, and then that's what we'll call it. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time.